That is true. Maybe we should inform everybody about our history. Oh! Hi, mates. See, you're here early again. How do you mates do this? I don't get it. I'm reading up on a little bit of our history, to say the least, but it's still a little debatable on whether it's our history or not. But we are talking about our specific thing today, dealing with some of the people that we previously discussed and mentioned in other chapters. Because the last time we were here, we were talking about the gravestones and some of the findings that we found, even though it's not canon. It was just something fun to look over and have fun with. I'm actually having some second thoughts on what those gravestones are, so we will probably have a second story dealing with them when the time comes if we want to. But as far as things go, that is where the story is, but I'll let you know in the future. But today we are dealing with some of the history of the people who actually do exist on this place. We are talking about these very specific people that have been mentioned throughout the entire timeline of this series. And it's important that we know about them because, well, they had a heavy impact on everything. So today we are talking about the Kolmui. Kolmui are a race of people that we knew a long time in the timeline, but have been debated whether their motivations were what exactly they were looking for. But we are going to break down exactly who the Kolmui are and start discussing it right now. So unless you mates have any questions, we can begin. So what do you guys got? You know, some of those are actually some pretty good questions. But if you have those questions, please just resend them again later on in the comments, because I'm not going to remember them just right now. I won't be able to answer all those. So yeah, that'll be the case. But with that being said, let's go ahead and begin our story. So to begin our story, you will need to know that the Kolmui are the main race of people described by name and who are heavily described in the timeline. But to warn you, the information on the Kolmui is that of a scrambled egg. There's so much to be described about these people, and that some of the timeline words actually conflict with the other perspectives. Since the timeline is kind of all over the place, it's really hard to tell exactly what the Kolmui's intentions are. But by slowly piecing it together and setting up that little jigsaw puzzle, I think we can figure out exactly what it was that the Kolmui were looking for. As the timeline describes, they are a race of people that they either invaded or instated in the township, the one that we know today. The timeline briefly explains that the Kolmui found this area in which the town was built, so the town already existed here before the Kolmui showed up. And for some time, the Kolmui resided in this area to continue and build on their own. In this time, we learn that the Kolmui did in fact speak the old tongue. So most of us today speak other words like English, Spanish, French and everything like that. But we did not exactly know what the old tongue's name was. We just know that it was an ancient language, similar to Latin or something along those lines. But there were very specific keys in this old tongue that didn't exactly match with the common language that we know today. But words in the old tongue such as Evanon is a word of their language, and as many of you mates know, Evanon steel is actually the word for what we call Valiant. It's just a simple term, and then Evanon is kind of like what you would consider a Latin name, the original version of that said name. But we can assume the rest of the metals are also stemming from this, such as like Orki or white gold. White gold is a standard English, obviously it stemmed from some other branch of things, but Orki would definitely be one as well. It has that green tone to it, so it probably matches with that. We also learn from the general timeline that the Kolmui eventually came into contact with other people before and after the settlement. Yet it wasn't exactly their choice. Other groups had arrived at this location and spoke with many of the Kolmui members. This would cause an uproar of neighboring settlements to want to discuss further activities and negotiations. Which this particular section of the timeline gives us the Kolmui envoys. So my current affect is actually a modern iteration of the original envoys groups, but I gotta say they have a good taste in clothing. The Kolmui section of the timeline shows several branches that lead to explaining small details about the intentions the Kolmui had with their neighbouring groups. I hadn't noticed this at first, but in the cosmetics description of the Kolmui envoys, it states, envoys were sent to the township to form diplomatic relations. They weren't very well received by the townfolk. It wasn't long before it became clear that they too were victims of certain circumstance. When the tides of history took their turn, however, the town did not turn their back on the people in between. But to explain, they're saying that the Kolmui did not come from the Kolmui themselves. They were groups designated to visit the township where the Kolmui resided. And we can assume that these neighboring towns are probably other races, but they're not too well discussed, to say the least. We only hear about one other race, the Hebios, that we will talk about later on, but besides that, we haven't heard about anybody else. Probably names forgotten to time and history. But it was also kind of strange, because the creator of the timeline stated that many of the large photos created in the cosmetics is not canon. Stating that all these photos have no correlation to the event of the Township timeline. Yet much of what we see in these photos could give us some context. Specifically, I'm talking about the cosmetic rotation, the large image between September 22nd and October 6th. There's just so much detail happening in these pictures that would make it seem so futile to believe it wasn't, canon. But in this photo, this cosmetic rotation, there is a meeting happening between two groups. The blue shaded individuals to the left are, by character descriptions, are members of the Kolmui group. So they were actually Kolmui people. Whilst to the right is another neighboring group, likely one that we have not heard of. Because it definitely isn't Hebios, and there will be a reason why. But I guess I could give you a brief description that Hebios were more natural people. In this photo we do see that these people are more modern tech, to say the least. They have housing, they have systems in place, they have a government and everything like that. Not to say that the Hebios don't, but one that's a little bit more authoritative, I guess. But in this photo alone, you could see that some of the facial expressions and activities suggest that there's some sort of ill favor for each member. To say the least, it's likely that the Kolmui had some deeper intentions for why they were here, or why they spent any time outside of their home to begin with. But specifically, I am focusing on the mate who is dressed with his hands behind his back. He is called the local representative based on the timeline. He represents the Kolmui and stands to be the one to hear these negotiations and discussions amongst neighboring colonies. Because in his appearance you can see he's very monotone, showing nothing more than the shift in his eyes and the show's disgust or just soldier-like behavior. It's hard to tell exactly since he's so stale-faced. But he's not there to have a good time compared to some of the people in the back. But he's here to finish what he needs and leave. Though compared to the facial expressions that the loyal representative is giving, his other members who stand beside him do not share the same expression. But it's not too far-fetched to say that they follow the same guides as he does. But this kind of expression can show a sense of distrust or some sort of trap to become aware of. Which takes us back to the main timeline's point. Based on the description alone, we understand that the Kolmui were not good people. They were deceivers and conquerors, who only took for themselves. The name, actually, quite frankly, should have been enough to explain their view on the world. Though we can't say that the Kolmui intended to have that description of themselves because it wasn't their original name. The name actually came from a scholar who arrived at the township after the Kolmui people disappeared. But I gotta say, nonetheless, it was a rightful name for somebody who pillages their neighbors' homes. We understand that the Kolmui started seeking power. They were looking for something that has yet to really been discovered. And they had no diplomatic thought or intentions with their neighbors. They were more like viruses that would spread and grow with no goodwill in mind. They were meant to take, overthrow, and grow. Although at the end of this little description for what the Kolmui were, we understand that whatever happened in the end was likely not in their favour, and they probably lost. We see no actively living groups away from the town anywhere. We don't see anybody here as the town has been dissipated, and the only ones who remain are the players themselves. And as we progress in our stories from the timeline, we will learn the specific details of what brought the end to the Kolmui. We'll slowly break it down, and in the finale of our reading of this timeline, we will actually see what conclusions we come to on what happened to the Kolmui, what exactly did they do, and how did it come to an end. But we have a few thoughts in mind that we're going to get through. But yes, this is who the Kolmui are. They were people who definitely did have no intention of being friendly. They didn't think about diplomacy. I said that very strange. Diplomacy, or any sense of kindness or trade. They were conquerors and invaders, pillagers and takers. It's strange to see an entire race who just does that out of ill will, but here you are. But that is the story of the Kolmui and everything that you could possibly know for now, until we start getting into more detail of some of the neighbouring races, see if we find any names that we can call them ourselves, based on their academic or sort of background or stuff like that. Because as the Hebios are, they were more natural people. The Hebios were people who lived out in the plains, originally thought as to be frog people by my mind, actually are just regular people. They actually just lived off the land, to say the least. And that might have some sort of tie-in into what happened actually out in this town, because most of the town doesn't actually look naturally built. It definitely was Kolmui. So who knows what this place actually looked like beforehand, but it's likely that the township actually started because of the Kolmui, and it wasn't actually here to begin with. But that's about it. So if you mates have any questions, just let me know. Let me know if I didn't cover something that I should have about the Kolmui, and if I haven't, then we'll probably talk about it later on, because it might be important to that point. Because there are a lot of branches that are leading to this, but also it kind of really expands outwards. This is a crazy tree that we're working with, but we are going to try to figure this entire story on our own, or all together. We'll see what happens, because this isn't just a game. There's some story behind it and some reasons to why the things that exist the way we know it. But yeah, so that should be it. Do consider becoming part of the channel if you enjoyed what you see. It's a very easy button right there in the bottom corner. I always forget where it is. I think it's over there. It's probably over there. Yeah, it's over there. And let me know what recommendations you have for other games that I could play or other things I could do in this one. But with that being said, I do hope you mates enjoyed. Hope you have a wonderful day. And goodbye.